Air conditioning disconnects and the use of pull-out fuse-type disconnects are addressed within the National Electrical Code, specifically Section 430.109. This section dictates the requirements for disconnect means used for motor circuits, including those powering air conditioning compressors. The acceptability of a pull-out fuse-type disconnect hinges on whether it meets the stipulations outlined in this code section. Generally, a disconnect must be horsepower rated, meaning it is designed and tested to safely interrupt the motor's full load current and lock safely. It needs to handle the inrush current experienced during motor starting. Pull-out fuse disconnects, while offering a means of disconnecting power and providing overcurrent protection, may not always meet the horsepower rating requirement, particularly for larger air conditioning units. If the disconnect is not horsepower rated, it might not be suitable for use as a motor disconnect. The code emphasizes the importance of using disconnects that can reliably interrupt the motor circuit under various operating conditions, including overload and fault conditions. A key consideration is the disconnect's ability to safely interrupt the motor's locked rotor current, which is significantly higher than a full load current. If a pull-out fuse-type disconnect is not specifically designed and rated for motor applications, it may not have the necessary interrupting capacity. There are other types of disconnects commonly used for air conditioning equipment include non-fused disconnect switches, which rely on a separate overcurrent protective device such as a circuit breaker or fuses located upstream in the circuit, and fused disconnect switches, which incorporate fuses within the disconnect enclosure. These types of disconnects are typically horsepower rated and provide a reliable means of disconnecting power to the air conditioning compressor. When selecting a disconnect for an air conditioning unit, it is essential to carefully review the equipment's nameplate information, including the motor's horsepower rating, full load amps, and locked rotor amps. This information will help determine the appropriate size and type of disconnect required. It is also crucial to consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and standards. If the pull-out fuse-type disconnect lacks a horsepower rating, it is generally not considered an acceptable disconnect for air conditioning compressors. The NEC prioritizes safety and reliability, and using appropriately rated disconnects is essential for protecting equipment and preventing electrical hazards. It is important to choose a disconnect that is specifically designed and rated for motor applications to ensure safe and reliable operation. If an inspector sees the pull-out disconnect that is not horsepower rated, it would be red tagged. The NEC is updated every 3 years. The specific requirements for motor disconnects may be subject to change. Staying informed about the latest code revisions is important for electrical professionals. The requirements for disconnects can also vary depending on the specific application and the size of the motor. Factors such as the motor's horsepower rating, voltage, and operating environment can all influence the selection of an appropriate disconnect. Local amendments to the NEC might exist. Always consult with local authorities. Pull-out disconnects are more for general-purpose usage for non-motor loads. They are usually installed with cartridge fuses. The electrical inspector is the final say if something is compliant or not compliant with local codes. One should consult with them to get the proper installation done according to the NEC and local jurisdictions for any electrical device or equipment. The disconnect switch must be readily accessible and located in sight from the motor or controller. The term in sight from typically means that the disconnect switch must be visible from the motor or controller location, and it should not be more than 50 feet away. This requirement ensures that the disconnect switch can be easily accessed in case of an emergency or during maintenance procedures. The disconnect switch must clearly indicate whether it is in the open or closed position. This helps prevent confusion and ensures that workers can easily determine whether the circuit is energized or de-energized. The disconnect switch must be lockable in the open position. This is an important safety feature that allows workers to lock out the power to the equipment during maintenance or repair work. By locking the disconnect switch in the open position, workers can prevent the equipment from being accidentally energized while they are working on it. The disconnect switch must be suitable for the environmental conditions in which it is installed. For example, If the disconnect switch is installed in a wet or damp location, it must be rated for wet locations. Similarly, if the disconnect switch is installed in a hazardous location, it must be rated for hazardous locations. The disconnect switch must be properly grounded to ensure that it is safe to operate. Grounding helps to protect workers from electric shock and also helps to prevent damage to equipment. Other types of AC disconnects are rotary disconnects, which use a rotating handle to open and close the circuit. They are available in both fused and non-fused versions. There are also molded case circuit breakers, which can also serve as a disconnect switch. These devices provide both overcurrent protection and a means of disconnecting the circuit. Fused disconnect switches are commonly used for air conditioning equipment because they provide both overcurrent protection and a means of disconnecting the circuit. The fuses protect the equipment from damage caused by overloads and short circuits. Non-fused disconnect switches are also used for air conditioning equipment, but they require a separate overcurrent protective device, such as a circuit breaker or fuses, to be installed upstream in the circuit. It is important to choose the correct size and type of fuse for the disconnect switch. The fuse size should be based on the equipment's nameplate information and the requirements of the NEC. The fuse type should be based on the application and the type of load being protected. When installing a disconnect switch, it is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. The disconnect switch should be mounted securely and all connections should be made properly. All wiring should be installed in accordance with the NEC. Air conditioning equipment is a significant energy consumer, so it is important to choose energy-efficient equipment and to operate it efficiently. Properly maintaining air conditioning equipment can also help to reduce energy consumption. Regular maintenance includes cleaning the coils, changing the filters, and inspecting the system for leaks. The NEC provides specific requirements for the installation and maintenance of air conditioning equipment. These requirements are designed to ensure that the equipment is installed and operated safely and efficiently. It is important to consult the NEC and any applicable local codes before installing or maintaining air conditioning equipment. When working on electrical equipment, it is important to take precautions to protect yourself from electric shock. Always to energize the circuit before working on it. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as gloves and safety glasses. Never work on electrical equipment when you are wet or standing in water. If you are not comfortable working on electrical equipment, hire a qualified electrician to do the work for you. Electrical work can be dangerous, so it is important to take precautions to protect yourself. The licensed professional should have a thorough understanding of the NEC requirements related to electrical installations. It is the responsibility of the electrical contractor to ensure the work performed meets the standard of practice. They should be aware of what is acceptable and not acceptable when using the NEC. The electrical inspector is trained to look for compliant and non-compliant installations according to the NEC, state and local codes. Pull-out fuse disconnects are generally not horsepower rated, therefore they are not compliant with the NEC for use on motor loads such as air conditioning units. They may be used for other applications such as electric heating. Electric heating is a resistive load which typically does not have a large inrush of current when starting up. Motor loads such as air conditioning units require more robust disconnects that are rated for the horsepower and locked rotor amps of the unit.